Her stepfather broke her leg and forced her to beg. Then a masked cowboy stepped in. Dust blew low across the desert floor, rolling like a whisper between the sun-cracked rocks. The sky, an open wound of dying orange, spilled shadows over the jagged edges of a canyon that never forgot blood. Somewhere in that silence, thinner than air, heavier than regret, a child sat alone. Her name was Mara. She was 12, though she looked younger. Too thin, too quiet. Her right leg was bound in a makeshift splint made of bark, twine, and whatever pity the wilderness had offered her that day. The leg was bent wrong. It throbbed without rhythm, without end. Each heartbeat was a hammer. She didn't cry. From a few paces away, heavy boots crushed gravel, each step deliberate, each one louder than it needed to be. The man walking toward her was tall, leathery, and sun-hardened. His name was Samuel Croft, but she didn't call him that. She called him Sir, or Please Stop. He wasn't her father, not really, just the man who married her mother after the war, after things started falling apart, after hope went cold. He tossed a tin cup in front of her with a clatter. It rolled, spun, then fell still in the dust at her feet. "You know what to do," he said. No warmth, no second glance, just boots, dust, and the smell of whiskey soaked into his coat. Mara stared at the cup like it might grow teeth. The town road behind her was empty now, but it wouldn't be for long. The travelers would come, some on horseback, some pulling wagons heavy with copper and corn. Most wouldn't look at her. A few might drop a coin, one might ask questions. That last kind was the worst. Samuel loomed. His belt scraped as he shifted. "Smile if they ask," he said. "Tell him you got the pox. That's why your leg don't work." "I don't have the pox," she whispered. He crouched. The scent of tobacco and dried sweat poured over her like a net. His eyes were pale and too close. "You don't have much of anything, do you?" She tried to hold his gaze. She failed. Her eyes dropped, finding her own trembling fingers. "Thought not," he said. He stood and walked back to the wagon, leaving her small and broken in the shade of a scrub brush. She could hear the wood creak under his weight as he climbed up, heard the clink of his flask, the pull of the cork, the deep gulp, the sigh. Mara turned her eyes toward the road. The first traveler came not long after. A woman in a long brown coat, wide-brimmed hat, leading a mule. She glanced at Mara, hesitated, then walked on. The second came with a cart full of lumber. He dropped a coin, didn't look, didn't stop. The third asked, "Who did that to your leg?" he said. Mara stared at the tin cup. A single copper piece winked back at her, dull and tired. "I fell," she said, voice thin. "You sure, miss?" She nodded. The man lingered, then glanced toward the wagon where Samuel pretended to nap. His hand hovered near his belt, where a pistol rested, but then he shook his head and walked on. As the sun dropped behind the canyon rim, Samuel climbed down from the wagon. He was slower now, meaner too, the kind of slow that only came from the bottom of a bottle. He reached her, squinted down, and saw only the single coin. "You call this beggin'?" he said. She said nothing. He slapped the cup from her lap. The coin clinked once, then vanished into the sand. She didn't flinch. Not anymore. "I ought to break the other leg," he muttered. "Maybe then you'd get some sympathy." She didn't look up. He crouched again, closer this time, and for one moment his hand touched her hair. But it wasn't gentle. He grabbed a fistful and twisted. "You think you're better than me?" he hissed. "You think just 'cause your daddy wore a uniform, you're worth more than dirt?" She didn't answer. She was staring past him into the long throat of the can, beyond where the light had turned purple and strange. A figure stood there, distant, still, silent. At first she thought it was a tree the way it didn't move, but the shape was wrong, too tall, too straight. She blinked. It was a man, a rider. No, just the man. His horse waited further back, half-shadowed, reins tied to a gnarled branch. The man stepped forward into the fading light. A wide-brimmed hat obscured his face. A dark kerchief covered the lower half. His coat was thick and travel-worn. A rifle hung at his side, silent as a ghost. Samuel followed her gaze. "What the hell?" he muttered. The man stopped a few paces away. "You lost, stranger?" Samuel called. No answer. "I said, you beat that child again," the stranger said, voice low and even. "And I'll bury you right here." The silence that followed wasn't quiet. It was full. The kind of silence that made birds stop singing. Samuel let go of Mara's hair and straightened. He took 2 steps toward the stranger. "You talk big for a man with his mouth covered." The stranger tilted his head. His eyes were unreadable, but they held no fear. "Name's Jonah," he said. "That's all you need." "Well, Jonah," Samuel sneered, hand drifting toward his belt, "I think you ought to ride on." Jonah's rifle moved in a blur. He didn't raise it. He placed it, lightly, purposefully, against his shoulder. He didn't aim. He just waited. Samuel's fingers paused near his pistol. He thought about it. Then he thought better. His hand fell away. "I don't want no trouble," he muttered. Jonah said nothing. Samuel stepped back toward the wagon, cursing under his breath. "Crazy bastard," he growled. Jonah finally looked down at Mara. "Can you walk?" he asked. She shook her head. "My leg." He nodded once. Then he did something Mara didn't expect. He set down the rifle, slow and careful, then knelt beside her. His gloved hands hovered just above her knee. "This'll hurt," he said. "I'm used to that," she replied. The pain when he lifted her was sharp and white, like biting down on a scream, but his grip was sure, strong. He held her like she mattered. Jonah turned toward the canyon. "Where are you taking her?" Samuel barked. Jonah didn't stop walking. "You can't just take... She's mine." Jonah paused, just long enough to say one thing over his shoulder. "No, she ain't." Then he walked into the canyon with Mara in his arms, the sun behind them, bleeding out. They didn't stop until the sky had turned to ink. The fire he built was small, hidden between rocks. The stars overhead were fierce and cold. Coyotes cried in the distance, and somewhere closer, a rattler buzzed a lazy warning. Jonah laid her down gently, propping her leg on a folded bedroll. She watched him move. Efficient, quiet. He didn't speak unless necessary. When he finally did, it was just this. "Hungry?" She nodded. He handed her half a biscuit and a strip of dried meat. She chewed slowly, eyes never leaving him. "You from here?" he asked. She shook her head. "No." "Where's your ma?" "She died last winter." He didn't ask how. "Your pa?" "Shot at Shiloh," she said. "Blue coat." He nodded, slow. "Lot of good men died there." "Were you?" "Yes," he said. She looked away. They sat in silence for a while. Fire cracked gently. Wind whispered through mesquite. Jonah's hat hung on his knee. His eyes were closed, but he wasn't asleep. "Why'd you help me?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quiet. "I got a daughter, or had. She'd be about your age. What happened? Wife died birthing her. Then a fever came through Santa Fe. Took the girl too." She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. After a while, Jonah stood. He checked the perimeter, refilled the fire, then sat again. The shadows danced across his face. "I ain't a hero," he said. "I've done things, bad ones, but I know what I saw today, and I ain't walking past it." She studied him. The mask was off now. His beard was rough, speckled with gray. His eyes held storms. "What are you going to do with me?" she asked. He leaned back against the rock. "You got somewhere to go?" "No." "You want to go back?" She shook her head. "Then we ride," he said. "West, maybe north." "What's there?" "Not him," Jonah said. "That's enough for now." She didn't argue. The fire burned low, and for the first time in weeks, maybe longer, Mara slept. She dreamed of horses, of rivers, of a sky that never ended. She dreamed of her mother's voice and Jonah's quiet strength and a place where no one asked her to beg. When morning came, it brought dust and wind, but also something else. Hope, and just enough fire to keep going. The sun broke over the rim of the canyon with a brittle kind of light, the kind that didn't warm, only revealed. Jonah stirred before the first crow cried, his silhouette rising against the embers of their dying fire. Mara watched from beneath the wool blanket he'd wrapped around her the night before. Her leg ached, but the pain was no longer the center of her thoughts. Something else had taken root. Movement, motion, forward. Jonah knelt beside her and examined the splint. He didn't speak, not yet. His hands worked methodically, tightening the bindings, replacing the bark with strips of pine he'd carved smooth in the dark. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was a language between them now, one of breath and shared endurance. She winced as he adjusted the angle. He paused and looked at her, not with pity but with understanding. "We'll ride slow," he said. "You can hold on or sleep. Either way, we make distance." She nodded. "Will he follow?" Jonah didn't answer right away. He adjusted the cinch on his saddle, then offered her his arm. She took it, gritting her teeth as he lifted her onto the horse. "If he does," Jonah said, mounting behind her, "he'll wish he hadn't." The road westward was less a path and more an idea. Loose stone and jagged roots tested the horse's gait. Jonah guided them around the worst of it, his grip steady behind her, the reins loose but sure in his hands. The horse, a patient dun gelding with an old scar across its flank, moved with the cautious wisdom of something that had seen fire and lived. Mara tried to stay awake, tried to be strong, but the pain and rocking motion lulled her. She slept in broken dreams, her mother's voice calling through trees, the crunch of boots behind her, Samuel's shadow bleeding into every corner. When she woke, it was to Jonah speaking low. "We'll stop here." The land around them was uneven, rising into pine-strewn hills, sharp with the scent of sap and something wild. Jonah dismounted, then lifted her gently down. He set her near a tree stump and handed her a piece of jerky, a tin of water. "You need strength," he said. "Won't always be flat ground." She ate slowly, chewing each bite until it felt like something earned. Her eyes wandered the forest, wide and unfamiliar. Birds flitted above, unseen but heard. A creek babbled nearby, its voice soft but persistent. She realized she hadn't heard silence like this before, alive, not empty. Jonah worked beside her, gathering branches, checking the sky. "You don't talk much," she said. He shrugged. "Talk's not always useful. Were you always alone?" "No," he said simply. Mara pulled the blanket tighter. "You said your daughter died." "Yeah." "Do you see her? In me?" Jonah paused, crouching beside the small fire pit. "I see someone who deserves a better chance." "I don't know how to be anything," she whispered. "I'm broken." "No, you're not," he said. "Not yet." She looked at her leg. "I feel like it." Jonah stirred the kindling, the flames beginning to flicker. "Pain ain't the same as broken. Trust me." They camped there for 2 nights, waiting for the swelling in her leg to ease. Jonah taught her how to clean the wound, how to wrap the bandage tight but not cut off the blood. He carved a walking stick from a branch, made her test her balance on it. The first time she fell, she cursed. The second time, she laughed. The third, she stayed standing. By the 3rd day, the storm came. It wasn't a roaring wall of wind like the desert storms she'd known. It was colder, crueler. Rain slashed the trees sideways, and the sky went dark at noon. Jonah built a lean-to against a rock face, using tarp and rope. Inside it was cramped but dry. Mara huddled beneath the blanket, listening to the hiss of rain on canvas, feeling the closeness of a man who had become her compass. "I used to dream of running away," she said into the quiet. Jonah looked up from his carving. "And?" I didn't know where I'd go. You think you know now? I think I'm tired of running. He nodded. That's a start. Lightning lit the trees beyond the top. Thunder rolled through the hills like a drum of war. Mara leaned back against the rock and closed her eyes. My mother was kind, she said softly. She had hands like silk. Even when she worked the fields, she sang when she cooked. It made the house feel like a home. What happened to her? She got sick, real quick. Couldn't keep food down. Samuel said it was punishment for marrying a savage's daughter. Jonah's jaw tensed. She wasn't even Navajo. Just part. Her father was. But Samuel hated anything not white enough. Jonah added a fresh log to the fire. People like him see weakness in difference. It scares them. I was always that girl, even before my leg. That's not who you are, he said. Not anymore. She turned toward him. Who am I then? He didn't answer with words. He handed her the carved stick. It was smooth and curved, with a notch for her grip. You'll figure it out, he said, once you stand on your own. The storm passed by morning, leaving the earth damp and clean. Birds sang louder, bolder. The sky was a hard, shining blue. Mara limped beside the horse, the walking stick steadying her. Her leg throbbed, but it held. They moved deeper into the wilderness, away from towns and roads. Jonah took them along deer trails, past creeks that sang and valleys filled with ferns. It was another world, green, endless. And in that world, the past began to thin. But it didn't vanish. On the fourth day, they heard riders. Jonah stiffened. He motioned for Mara to crouch beneath a fallen tree trunk. He melted into the brush like smoke. Hooves approached. 3 riders, loud, untrained. Bandits by the look of them. One had a red scarf and a rifle across his lap. Another wore army boots too clean for his filthy coat. The third had eyes that never stopped moving. Mara held her breath. The riders stopped not 20 yards from her hiding place. One dismounted, walking to a tree, relieving himself, spitting afterward. Think the girl went this way? The one in boots asked. The red scarf man shrugged. Croft said west. Kid's got a bum leg. They can't be fast. Croft's a damn fool, the third muttered, letting her get taken. I'd have sold her by now. The words hit Mara like cold water. Jonah didn't wait for more. The first shot cracked like thunder. Red Scarf dropped before he could reach his reins. The second man dove behind a rock. The third shouted and fired wildly into the trees. Jonah moved like he wasn't flesh. A shadow. A curse. One moment nothing, the next, a figure rising from behind them. The second shot caught the man in boots in the shoulder. He screamed. The third ran. Jonah didn't chase. Mara climbed from her hiding place, heart pounding. She looked at the man still alive, writhing in pain. Jonah stood over him, rifle aimed. You tell Croft, Jonah said, voice like gravel. He's got one chance to leave this be. The man whimpered. He ain't gonna stop. Jonah lowered the rifle slowly. Then he'll die for sure. They moved on quickly, faster now, deeper into terrain that only birds and ghosts knew. Jonah said little. Mara didn't need him to. She could feel the storm returning. Not in the sky, but in the trail behind them. On the 6th night, they met someone else. It was dusk, and they had made camp near a canyon wall. Mara was boiling creek water when a figure appeared at the edge of firelight. She froze. Jonah didn't reach for his rifle. Instead, he raised a hand in quiet greeting. The figure stepped closer. Tall, dark hair braided with sinew and feathers. His face was painted with ash and clay. He said nothing, but Mara saw his eyes, ancient, tired, watchful. This is Chi, Jonah said. Old scout, helped me once during the war. Chi nodded once. Then he looked at Mara, tilting his head slightly. She couldn't read his expression, but he wasn't unkind. He knelt and reached for her walking stick. With a glance for permission, He examined it, then set it down carefully. "He says you're strong," Jonah translated. "You're not hiding. You're walking." Mara blinked, surprised by the compliment. Chi reached into a pouch and pulled out dried berries, placing them in her hand. Then he stepped back, fading into the shadows beyond the fire. He didn't stay the night. "Will he help us?" she asked. "He's already helping," Jonah said. "You'll see." The next morning she woke to find a new splint beside her bedroll, smoothed, carved with protective symbols. It fit perfectly. It didn't hurt when she walked. Chi didn't return, but they moved differently after that, more aware, more prepared. Jonah taught her to read tracks, to smell rain, to recognize edible plants. Mara listened, learned. She stopped being the girl with the broken leg. She became something else. Not whole, but healing. And when the day came that she walked 10 steps without pain, Jonah didn't say anything. He didn't need to. That night, Mara sat by the fire alone, watching embers rise into the sky. The stars were sharp and endless, says. He didn't think of Samuel. She didn't think of her old house or the town or the strangers who looked away. She thought of her mother's song. She sang it softly, the words broken but true. Behind her, Jonah listened. When she finished, he said, "We're near a settlement. Old trading post. We can rest there a day or two." "Will it be safe?" He hesitated. "Safer than most." She nodded. "Then we go." "Tomorrow," he said. "Tonight. You sleep." She lay back, the fire's warmth brushing her face. Her leg no longer throbbed. Her heart beat steady. But even as sleep pulled her down, she felt it, that something was coming. A final reckoning, and she was ready to meet it. The sun rose pale over the edge of the prairie, a weak thing hidden behind gauze clouds. It wasn't the kind of dawn that promised peace. It was the kind that came after too much silence, like breath held too long. Mara rode with Jonah at a slow trot, her stick tied to the saddle, her leg better but still stiff. The pain was a memory now, dull but instructive, like an old scar you can't help but touch. They approached the trading post in the early morning. A scattering of wood-planked buildings huddled beneath a cluster of scrub oaks, smoke curling from one chimney. Fences leaned like tired men. There was a well at the center, its rope frayed, bucket cracked. A man in a hat too big for his head looked up from watering his mule, eyes narrowing. Jonah tipped his hat. The man nodded but said nothing. They dismounted in front of the general store. Jonah moved first, checking windows, the doorframe, the way footprints spread in the dirt. Mara followed close, watching everything the way he taught her. She leaned on her stick but didn't stumble. Inside, the store smelled of salt pork, kerosene, and sweat. A fat man behind the counter grunted at their entrance. His beard was stained with tobacco, his left eye lazy. Jonah asked for supplies. Jerky, ammo, coffee, bandages. The man nodded, moving slow, eyes flicking to Mara like he couldn't quite place her. She stiffened. "You two heading west?" the shopkeep asked. Jonah answered with a shrug. "Just passing through." "Well," the man said, drawing out the word like a knife, "you might want to ride fast. Had a group come through 2 days ago, big fella with a limp, mean, kept asking about a girl." Mara's blood went cold. Wanted to know if anyone had seen a crippled kid with a bounty hunter. The man smiled without humor. "Didn't say why, but we figured it weren't for good reasons." Jonah remained still. "He say where he was headed?" The shopkeep nodded toward the north road. "Said he'd be back if no one talked. Don't much like that type." Jonah took the supplies and paid in full. He didn't say another word. Outside, the sky had turned steel gray. The wind had a bite to it. Mara clutched her satchel closer to her chest. Her fingers trembled, but her shoulders stayed square. "Do you think he's close?" she asked. "He's always close," Jonah said. "He's not going to stop." She didn't ask what they would do. She already knew. They left the post, riding through a dry gulch toward the trees. Jonah led them to a ridge overlooking the valley, where wind scraped rock and eagles circled above. From there, They waited. By midday, dust curled on the southern trail. Jonah looked through the spyglass. One man on horseback, followed by two others on foot. Samuel led them. He was heavier now, slower, but his face was unmistakable, mean, sunburnt, a bruise beneath one eye. The pistol at his hip gleamed. He hadn't come to reason. He'd come to reclaim. Mara watched him move, recognizing the way he turned his head, always searching, always ready to explode. The sight of him sent a sharp pulse through her chest. But it wasn't fear, not anymore. It was something colder, a weight she had carried for too long and was ready to set down. Jonah handed her a pistol. "Are you sure?" she asked, surprised. "You don't have to use it," he said, "but it's better to have the choice." She gripped the gun with both hands, tested the weight. Her palms were slick. Jonah turned toward her, eyes steady. "No matter what happens, don't run. Not anymore." She nodded. They waited until the men crossed into the valley, closer to the rocks where Jonah had positioned cover. The trap was simple, a bluff, a narrow choke point, high ground. Jonah had planned it well. Samuel shouted her name before he reached the clearing. "Mara, you come on out now, girl." His voice was rougher than she remembered, more hollow. It carried desperation, not authority. She didn't move. Jonah waited until the last man passed the marked ridge, then fired a warning shot into the dirt between Samuel's boots. The horse reared, nearly unseating him. "Easy," Samuel barked, drawing his weapon. "Where are you?" Jonah stepped out from the rocks, rifle in hand, calm as stone. "That's far enough." Samuel narrowed his eyes. "You think you can keep her from me?" "She's not yours to keep," Jonah said. Samuel laughed, bitter. "She's mine by law. Her mother married me. That makes me kin. You ain't nothing." Mara stepped out beside Jonah, her pistol lowered but visible. Samuel saw her and his expression shifted. Shock, then rage. "You come here right now, girl," he snapped. "You don't get to run." "I'm not running," Mara said. Her voice didn't shake. One of Samuel's men moved toward her. Jonah raised his rifle and fired. The bullet struck the ground inches from the man's foot. He jumped back, hands raised. "No more games," Jonah said. Samuel dismounted, his boots kicking up dust. He stared at Mara. "You've got no future without me," he said. "You're broken, crippled, half-breed filth. No one wants you." "I do," she said. "I want me." The words echoed between the rocks. Even the wind seemed to still. Samuel growled and lunged forward, drawing his pistol. Mara lifted hers instinctively. The shot rang out before she could fire.